The truth about an all-winner season is you have to have 18 or 20 great winners. So if and when we reach that point, I think it'd be really fun.
One soul will survive. It's coming for you.
Ladies and gentlemen, internet, my name is Peridiam and welcome to Winners at War. Saying that never gets old. Before the storm hits, let's take stock of the many paths to victory that got us to where we are today. 20 winners are entering the fray for Winners at War, and for those of you out there who may not have seen every season or remember every winner and what they were about, all good. That's why I'm here. In this video, I'll be breaking down each of the 20 winners on Season 40, Survivor Winners at War, giving a brief synopsis of their story on their winning season, perhaps a detail or two reminding us if they've played more than once, and maybe outlining what their biggest move of their season was. This is less a video series about my analysis and more a quick catch up for those who just don't want to watch every season that they missed or forgot about in preparation for Winners at War. And because I don't want to spread myself too thin, I want to give each winner a proper amount of time to cover their story. I'm breaking this up into 4 parts, 5 winners per part. Believe me, when I initially wanted to make this video, I had it actually all in 1 part, and then I split it up into 2 parts, and then I realized yeah, there's a lot to unpack here. It needs to be said there will be a massive amount of spoilers for each of the winners in this video series, so yeah, if you don't want to be spoiled, I would recommend watching my previous video where I talked about which seasons to watch to get ready for Season 40. Watch all of those seasons and then some, and then get back to me. Anyway, let's get started. Likely going in chronological order, the first winner that we need to talk about is the winner of 2001's Survivor Africa, Ethan Zorn.
Ethan Zorn, now millionaire.
Ethan is generally regarded as one of the most likable, positive winners in Survivor history, both statistically from edit analysis and fan reception. I would say he is the most positive, and after 37 seasons since his original appearance, I don't think that's going to change. Ethan began on the Yellow Boran tribe and connected with 2 of the biggest players that season, Big Tom and Lex. The 3 of them were the Boran boys, and they dominated the season, though not in like a heavy-handed way. They never came across as very dominant or oppressive like other strong alliances, probably because there were only 3 of them and they never really had like a strong majority. They just sort of insulated themselves really well and were all rather likable enough for the other players to circle around them. Ethan was by far the most likable of them all, and that's really the biggest selling point of his story. Ethan doesn't have as many strategic moments to hang his hat on compared to the other winners in this video. He was always somewhere near the top of the pecking order, but never at the forefront. He was the assistant coach to the ringleader in Lex, so much so that he never even received a vote against him all season. He was a part of the first ever tribe swap in Survivor history at the final 12, where he pulled off perhaps his biggest move, throwing a challenge to eliminate his biggest threat, Silas.
This may sound crazy, and I've never done this in my life. I'm an athlete. I go out to win. I've never fixed anything. Like, what would you think if we lost this next challenge on purpose?
From there, Ethan entered the merge with numbers, but it was largely Lex who pulled the strings, winning over Brandon at the final 9 to keep the majority, as he and the Boran boys marched their way to the end. Ethan did also manage to lead the charge against Brandon at the final 8, cementing his position as Lex's continued right-hand man. The Boran boys were poised to be the top 3 of the season, except the 4th member in their alliance, Kim, won immunity at the final 4 and the final 3, but because Ethan was never the puppet master, he was able to get taken to the final 2, where he handily won over Kim. He was likable, diplomatic, cool, calm, collected. He did return for Survivor All-Stars in Season 8, but he was voted out in 11th place, having a major target on his back as a former winner. It does need to be said, he was the last winner of all of those targets in All-Stars to get voted out, so there is something he can hang his hat on for that season. Both him and Amber Burkich Mariano have a 32 season gap since they last played Survivor, and it'll be this gap in time that'll tell us if Ethan is ready to adapt to the modern game, where a tribe swap will be the least of his worries. Ethan is old school to the T, but as we just saw in season 39, the social game reigns supreme, and that, by far and away, was his strongest asset when he won.
The winner of Survivor Africa.
The next winner, Queen Stays Queen, it's Sandra Diaz-Twine. Don't say it twice. No, just kidding. Please do, because she's the only two-time winner going into Winners at War. Sandra, good luck preventing another two-timer from happening. Sandra won both Season 7, Pearl Islands, as well as Season 20, Heroes vs. Villains. And amusingly enough, she employed a very similar strategy both times that proved to be very successful. Sandra's overall strategy can be chalked up to anyone but me. In other words, as long as she's not receiving the votes, it doesn't really matter who is. And given she's won twice, you gotta imagine, if it ain't her, who cares? It works. That being said, despite her mantra being anyone but her, Sandra did form a strong three-person alliance with Krista and Rupert on Pearl Islands, and that alliance really was a sticking point for their duration in the game. The three of them voted together throughout the pre-merge, and going into the merge were poised to go really far. Johnny Fairplay managed to pull a fast one on them and blindsided Rupert at the final 8, leading to Sandra getting pretty dang unhappy. But this was Sandra at her least comfortable, and yet also at some of her best. Her biggest move of that season took place at the final 5, where she managed to bring together 3 very different women, herself, Lil, and Dara, to work together to seize the day over the boys in Burton and Johnny, who really believed they had gotten the better of the women and were taking them all for a ride. With Burton blindsided, Sandra was taken to the final 2 by Lil, where Sandra won convincingly 6-1. She was brash and blunt and told it like it is, but her sass and relatability endeared her to the jury over her fellow finalist. Also, because of a big twist that allowed players to come back into the game at the merge, it's important to note that Sandra was never voted out in the pre-merge.
The winner of Survivor Pearl Islands.
Sandra later returned to Season 20, Survivor Heroes vs. Villains, as she was placed on the Villains tribe. Right away, she formed a strong bond with Boston Rob, the kingpin of the tribe, and was brought into the fold of a majority alliance of 6, consisting of herself, Rob, Tyson, Courtney, Coach, and Jerry. However, after a serious blunder by Tyson at the final 15, her alliance was dismantled as Tyson and then Rob were voted out back to back. She pitted herself against a new variant of Johnny Fairplay from Pearl Islands, this time being Russell Hantz. Russell was the new big bad guy of the Survivor world, and similar to Fairplay, Sandra was directly opposing him at every point in the season. The rivalry would become the underlying focal point of tension amongst both the Villains tribe and the Merge tribe. Sandra's best move was at this point in the season. I actually spoke about this in my first ever video. She managed to buy time for both herself and her number 1 ally Courtney by tricking Russell into voting out Coach over either of them. Because Coach was voted out here at the final 12 and there was only one more elimination before the merge, Sandra just needed to survive one more vote to reach the individual portion of the game. And that's what happened. Courtney was taken out next, but then the merge hit and Sandra was ready to join the opposing Heroes tribe, given she was an outsider on the Villains tribe. But she couldn't rely on the Heroes to make a smart move, ingratiate her into their mix. There were a lot of problems with that tribe, and so she decided to stick with the Villains in hopes a crack may form in the future. The Heroes were a hot mess. They lost the numbers at the merge thanks to a fantastic double idol play by Parvati. And ultimately, what needs to be said here is that Sandra formed a strong bond with Parvati and decided it was in her best interest to go to the end with her. At some point in the post-merge, there was a shift where Sandra went from wanting to take Russell out to realizing she was a shoo-in to beat him. He was underestimating her and wanted to take her to the end, and she was going to beat him there. And that's what happens. That's the biggest thing to take away from the endgame on Heroes versus Villains. She chose to position herself against Russell, but not to ever vote him out. She let him sink his own ship and have Parvati go down with him, and in many cases, that's more than enough to win.
The winner of Survivor Heroes vs. Villains, Sandra.
She She beat Parvati, a fellow winner on Winners at War, in a 6-3 vote, and would later return for season 34, Survivor Game Changers, where she got voted out for the first time ever after an unlucky swap put her at a numbers disadvantage. And then she also returned alongside Boston Rob for season 39, Island of the Idols, as a mentor and a twist to help educate new players on how to succeed in the game. And then of course the winner never met her until the final 5, but hey, what are you gonna do? In the first ever All-Star season featuring returning players, we saw Amber Burkich, later Mariano, go on to become the 8th winner in Survivor history. Amber is best known for marrying Boston Rob, her cohort in crime, as they marched their way to the final 2 in Survivor All-Stars. Really, the two biggest aspects of Amber's game both hinge around Rob. And go figure, she's back again and she's with Rob. First, she formed a solid alliance with him on day 1. And second, she was a tad bit nicer than him all game, ultimately netting her the win over him once they faced the jury on day 39. The only dubious moment Amber faced was at the halfway point in the season. A tribe swap hit, and awkwardly enough, of the 10 people in the game, Amber was the only one to switch tribes. Her tribe had numbers 6-4, and then suddenly they were evened out 5-5, with Amber swapping all by herself. Now, how is she going to get out of this pickle? Well, she does, for two major reasons. First, Boston Rob leveraged his pregame alliance with Lex and Kathy to ensure her safety, promising Lex and Kathy safety if they saved Amber. And two, Amber herself made arguably her biggest move by making a deal with Lex and Kathy to take them to the final 5 alongside Rob and Big Tom. So Amber escaped near death, and then Rob mercilessly blindsided Lex and Kathy right after, and so because of that, by the time the two lovebirds had reached the end and were ready to face the music, Amber happened to be seen as the less vile of the two, the more innocent, and was therefore more worthy of winning, given Rob lacked tact and grace in his game. Whether you agree or disagree, the underlying point is that sometimes less can be more. You don't always need to be the puppet master of the game to win. How you treat players is incredibly important, and if there was ever one player I believe will be underestimated more than probably anyone else going into Winners at War, it's Amber. She's kind, friendly, understated, probably overlooked, and clearly knows how to hang with the best of them. You don't win the first All-Stars by doing nothing, even if that something was marrying your final 2 opponent.
The winner of Survivor All-Stars.
With season 11, Survivor Guatemala, we had Danni Boatwright, who played so far under the radar, she practically beat the radar, as she said. Danni is the most underrated Survivor winner to date, and her Guatemala win is the most forgotten about in the annals of Survivor history. Why is that? Well, Danni played a very quiet game, kind of similar to Amber, but even less in front, as she wasn't attached to the hip of anyone. She stated postseason that she purposefully hid herself from the producers to avoid them accidentally revealing her strategy to other players. She downplayed her game to keep it all under wraps. And why not? Sure, you can put on a show for us, but ultimately you are there to win. Survivor is a game, and the producers are definitely a part of it for better and even sometimes for worse. So if we didn't really get to see much of Danni, what's her story? Danni's game comes alive at the swap as she only visits Tribal Council in the first episode where a sickly man, Jim, is booted first. From there, Danni works alongside her meat shields in Brandon and Bobby John to secure the numbers going into the merge. The only problem here was that her swapped tribe kept losing challenges at the swap, and thus they kept losing numbers, with Blake, Brian, and then Amy leaving. Danni had positioned herself well in the swap tribe as the smallest target, but since her tribe was going into the merge down in numbers 4-6, it really wasn't going to mean anything. Or was it? Come the merge, her tribe was targeted to be voted out, and so Danni quickly realized she needed to pivot away from her meat shield allies and get in good with the power players pulling the strings on the opposing alliance. See, in the history of Survivor, normally the underdogs will attempt to take out the head of the opposition, but Danni did the opposite. She bonded with the two power players of the opposing tribe, Rafe and Stephanie, and positioned herself as an important ace up their sleeve, a pocket vote they could utilize when the majority alliance would eventually need to turn on one another. When Danni's alliance was decimated going into that final 6, it was nothing but her versus a tribe of 5. But she did win a crucial immunity at this point, which bought her time, and then she turned the power players against one of their own, sending Judd home. From here, Danni kept herself in the game by downplaying her game at the final 5 and the final 4, as well as emphasizing how important she was as a pocket vote and a guaranteed final 2 for Rafe against Stephanie. Essentially, Danni's game came down to social positioning, and it worked, as she won the final 3 immunity and took out her biggest threat, eventually winning in a landslide 6-1 vote over Stephanie.
The winner of Survivor Guatemala, Danni.
Survivor Guatemala is the most overlooked season of Survivor, with Danni at the forefront, and to be honest, it's kind of crazy to see her return over a decade later. Will she continue to beat the radar? We'll have to wait and hopefully this time actually get to see. With season 13, Survivor Cook Islands, we have Yul Kwon, one of the most likable winners in Survivor history outside of Ethan, who's also on this season from season 3. Really, Yul is beloved, and for good reason. His journey to the win was one of being the ultimate underdog, facing near impossible odds and still managing to triumph. Yul is the eternal diplomat. He's the definition of cool, calm, and collected. Jeff stated he is like the UN of Survivor. He hears everyone out, he's understanding, thoughtful, and rationalizes everything before making a move. He's very calculated, but not in like a conniving way. He was dubbed the Godfather on his season, as he was the guy the players went to make a hit. And even though Yul wasn't so comfortable being coined the Godfather, he was given most of the credit for the moves made that led his alliance to reaching the final 4 together. Yul's victory over Ozzy, one of the greatest challenge beasts in all of Survivor, is a testament to how strong his social and strategic game was. At face value, Ozzy wins probably like 9 out of 10 seasons with the game that he played in Cook Islands, or even in a later season, South Pacific, being the ultimate provider, winning a handful of immunities, overall just being a decent guy. But Yul was able to gain more respect from the jury for being the strong, calculated, deliberate mover and shaker of the game. There's a lot of craziness in Cook Islands, and I won't go through all of it to cover a synopsis, but what needs to be brought up was that Yul found the immunity idol in episode 2 and held on to it until the very end of the game, never even playing it. It was the more powerful idols we've seen before, the one where you can play them after the votes are read, so it was very much overpowered, basically an extra life in the game. But he was able to leverage that idol at the final 9 when his alliance of 4 needed a 5th vote, and Yul secured it with Penner, a man stuck in the middle of 2 factions. Yul didn't want to use the idol against Penner and instead wanted to work with him, have him join their side to have the majority, and he revealed his idol to Penner to encourage him to flip. And Penner did, because Yul's alliance was friendlier and more welcoming, and if Penner had to pick a winner of the lot, he'd rather see Yul win than, I don't know, someone like Parvati? Could you imagine Parvati winning? Anyway, that was Yul's biggest move. It gave him the numbers and eventually the game, alongside giving Penner's hat back to him after he was voted out. Game changer.
The winner of Survivor Cook Islands.
And that's going to be it for part 1 of this 4-part video series, but I am not going to send this video out with an outro because stay tuned. Right away, we are going to be jumping into part 2. I'll see you then.
You guys want to see the Great Cook Island humpback whale?
I've got 2 naked guys in a hut.